Hello, hello. I'm having yet another day of running around where I can't really sit down and do the things that I want to do, unfortunately. But I thought I would throw together another quick craft video because people seem to be liking those. This one is about, and this is a little vaguer than the others, but the idea of the shell game of prose. This won't be a long one, but it'll be simple enough, I hope. Let me just test my. Sometimes it takes a moment for me to get into the typing. So the shell game of prose, what am I talking about when I say that? Well, let's take a moment to think about a shell game. A shell game, say where it's like, where's the bean? And it's under one of three, and you flip them around. And the whole idea, it's all about control of attention and like thinking about attention. What is the reader paying attention to? Where's their focus? And what is the difference between what they're actively noticing, between what they're passively noticing, between what they're subconsciously noticing, and between what they're entirely missing, right? These are kind of the four layers, like active notice, when you draw attention directly to something, the door is red, right? That's sort of, I'm drawing active attention to the fact that the door is red, right? So in fact, let me label it active attention. Forgive the caps. The door is red. What is passive attention? Uh, he walked through the red door, right? So what's the difference between these? The first thing is, the door is red. Okay, switch from just make it was red. Just keep. I want to keep the tense. It doesn't actually matter that much whether it's present or. But I like to have it together. So the door was red. He walked through the red door. So the second sentence is you can tell immediately it's not about the fact that the door is red. It's about the fact that he's walking through the door. So our active attention is literally the active part of the sentence. In the grammatical sense, we're walking through the door, and as we're walking through the door, we notice passively that it's red. What is subconscious attention? This is where it starts to get subtle. It's hard to do this with just a single sentence. It's almost like, you know, I think that's good. I always get, I always go back and forth the whether it should be period or question mark after that kind of hypothetical sentence. But let's get back to the point, right? Like he looked at the doors which were red, green, and blue, right? Um, he asked Julia which one was the right one to go through. So what is the focus of this? We're looking at the doors, and we've now listed three doors, red, green, and blue. We haven't drawn attention to the red door. One of the doors is red, right? Um, she could say something along the lines of the one on the left, she answered. So that was the door he took, right? So subconsciously, later on in the same story, right? Sort of these things like where you get a chance to kind of like put together things after the fact, right? Or like the first one said. The point is to make it so that you have to like unless you shift your attention into the active, you don't actually notice what's happening, right? That's a subconscious attention. And then of course there's missing details or like no attention, right? And this one is hard to demonstrate because it's literally the lack of attention. It's sort of like it doesn't actually matter what color the door is, and it doesn't the detail doesn't come to the surface. I'm going to put a here. But let's do this a little more in context, right? Like how do we apply the shell game and why does it matter? The way I like to look at it is the shell game not only influences what the reader knows and is thinking about, it also influences in some ways how the reader feels or what they believe, right? So, like, what's a good example of this? The one I always use when I teach is I had dinner with the president last night, right? That's active attention. I'm telling you, actively had dinner with the president last night. Depending on the context, you may or may not believe me, but what you'll notice is the thing that I'm trying to tell you. My character, my voice, or whoever this is trying to tell you that they had dinner with the president last night. They're trying to give you an impression of themselves, of their station. There's an agenda behind these words. Compare. I was having dinner with the president last night. I got a phone call from my mom that left me feeling very worried. Now compare these sentences. In this first sentence, I had dinner with the president last night. If I tell someone that just off the cuff, they're probably not going to believe me, right? Because again, they're going to, it's too blunt, it's too on the face of it. They're going to be like, okay, he's trying to impress me, he's making as if he's lying, right? Like he's putting too much emphasis on the thing that he cares about, which is I want you to know that I'm important or whatever. And the second one, I was having dinner with the president last night. I got a phone call from my mom that left me feeling very worried. I'm not actually talking about the dinner with the president. I was talking to you about the phone call. The fact that I was having dinner with the president is suddenly a passive detail. You only passively notice it, and it has an easier way sneaking into your brain, right? Like it kind of gets, but let's keep going. Let's have another. Well, I was having dinner last night. So we dropped the detail about the president entirely. I got a phone call from my mom that left me worried. I took it out in the hallway, but it was hard to hear her. You know how loud the White House can be sometimes. I thought about stepping out the rest of the way into the garden, but somehow I think that would have started to feel rude. I don't know. All right. Now, what do you think? Have I mentioned the president at all? I haven't, right? Like, and in doing that, right? Like, you know that I was having dinner with the White House. You know, like you can put together subconsciously what's happening, or you can passively like put it together, but at no point am I telling you what it is that I want you to know. That's the shell game. And if you see these three sentences and somebody's trying to like put you into the scene, who are you going to believe? I know that they're, again, like with me, sometimes it feels like I cheat because my sentences are all different lengths, but put that aside for a moment and notice like the difference in bluntness, right? That bottom sentence, you can really finesse something. Now, that doesn't always mean, by the way, that subconscious attention is the correct choice, right? Like sometimes conscious attention, like, is actually more powerful, or passive attention. Like, use an example of passive attention being the better choice. So, like, right? So the fact that I was having dinner with the president is a detail of this, but it's not the focus. The focus is the call that the president got, and the focus is on the plot, right? And in a case like this, of like, oh, I was having dinner in the White House when like, if you're pussyfooting around it, so to speak, too much in a case like this where the plot is moving, like it's not good, actually. You want to be a little more direct. What's a situation where active attention is right? So like, uh, so that's like an example of how you can be direct, right? And in fact, the active voice here makes more sense for like drawing direct attention to the dinner with the president. And like now we're talking about something else. But if we had tried to insert that detail passively, it would no longer function, right? So it's really important, again, like as you do this kind of writing, like ask yourself the question, what is it that the reader should be focused on actively? What should they be passively taking in? And what should be a subconscious sort of absorption of them, right? You know, the things that they don't even notice, they notice. I remember I was at a conference a few years ago, by which I mean like many years ago, and there's an author speaking there, and my memory really fails me about who it was, and I apologize if there's no chance that he's seeing this, but if he sees this, I'm sorry for forgetting who you are. But he said all the best twists. This is probably a common piece of advice actually, but all the best twists are impossible to predict and obvious in retrospect. And that the fact that they're impossible to predict means that a lot of the information supporting those twists lives in passive and subconscious attention. If you place it in active attention, if you place too much of it in active attention, the hand of the author becomes too visible. Um, and you lose sort of the strength of that twist. But if you keep too much of that kind of twist work in particularly in the subconscious. You can't have all of it in the subconscious. Some of it has to be at least in the passive. If you keep all of that attention in the subconscious, or you keep it below the level of all consciousness, right? Like you kind of, don't plant any seeds at all, which often is what happens with beginner writers, where the twist isn't foreshadowed, it just suddenly happens, right? Like, oh my God. Um, that's it can be very unsatisfying because it never feels as though the reader was given room in which to discover, to make those discoveries, right? So I'll leave it off there. Keep it sort of simple. Um, at some point, I'm probably going to do a part two to this one where I sit down in like a more involved way and like try to use weave all these techniques, active, passive, and subconscious together in a single sort of stream to show the ways in which they come and go. But for now, I'll leave it where it is. Thank you for tuning in as always. I hope this is helpful.